All right, thanks to everybody for coming tonight. I want to give you a little bit of a history of how we came to trying to do something like this. Kate Joranson, who's right here. Hi, Kate. Joranson. Okay. Right. Lost the Y sound on the trip. Yeah. Kate Joranson. You learn something new every day. And I have been working together for the past 6 months to try to come up with this idea and coordinate it. It really was Kate coming to me and saying, hey, there's this new initiative through the Provost's office called the Year of the Humanities in the university. We should think about doing something at the interface of art and science. I know we both have an interest in that interface, and so what should we do? And so we sat a number of times thinking about what that could be, and we arrived at curiosity as being fertile common ground between these two different ways of knowing the world. And so it grew out of that, and we're happy that we have now pulled together 4 of these. This is the first of 4 of these discussion series with 16 different speakers. I'm going to call them conversationalists tonight because really they're not here to speak to you. They're here to chat with each other and involve you in that conversation. I'll introduce them in a moment, but I want to give you some sense for how we imagine this evening going. Because this is a conversation, we want you to be involved. And there are 2 ways that you can be involved tonight. We have a couple of undergraduate interns who will be circulating through the room. One will have a microphone, a wireless microphone, and the other will be collecting these paper cards here. So if you feel more comfortable writing an idea or a question that you think might help guide the discussion, write one down. If you hold up the card, then one of the students will come by and pick one up from you. If you would prefer instead to ask it on a microphone, just raise your hand without a card and they'll come by. We'll see how many people we can bring into the conversation in that way, but we hope that you do this early and often, okay, through the conversation. You are on camera, so I'd like to acknowledge that a local filmmaker here, Ambulantix Video Works, is here filming this, and the reason for that is because we had a limited capacity to accommodate an audience, and we actually have 45 people on the wait list who would have preferred to be here tonight, but we couldn't allow to come. And we'd like to offer this as something that they can watch in their leisure time or share with their friends. Of course, we'd appreciate it if you did that as well. And because we have your email addresses, we'll be letting you know where that is going to be posted online. Undergraduate interns from the humanities and the sciences are also going to be writing a blog post about this together as a collaborative venture, and that will be up with the video as well. Okay. This hasn't happened without any funding, of course, so I need to mention that this is through funding from the Provost's office as part of the Year of the Humanities in the University Initiative, and the Humanities Center, as well as the university library system, which has been very generous in providing this location as well as funding for this. Future events will be hosted elsewhere in Oakland, and they will have funding from the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, the Department of Biological Sciences. So this is really a cross-university and cross-Oakland initiative, if you will. So I'm going to introduce the 4 people that are here with us tonight. My intention is not to be in the spotlight in just a minute. I want to be a facilitator here, and I really want them to take over with this conversation. And so I'm going to introduce you very briefly to these 4 individuals that we've picked because they come at this question of curiosity from very different backgrounds. And so I'll start with Dr. Ed Stricker, all the way on the left here. Dr. Stricker is the Dean of the University Honors College, and he also founded the neuroscience program here. So he's a neuroscientist by training, founded a nationally recognized program in that, and now is really thinking about how universities can be better educators. And so he'll have some useful insights on that front. Alison Langmead right here is in the History of Art and Architecture department and the iSchool. And she is a digital humanist, and I hope that she will tell us what that means. It involves thinking about archiving. It's fascinating, actually, and she's going to do a better job of describing that than I will. Aaron Henderson, to her right here, is in studio arts, and he is a working artist that uses video as his medium, oftentimes with the focus on performance. And Dr. Paolo Palmieri here comes from the History and Philosophy of Science department. He started his career in the history of science, thinking about the scientific revolution, and that has taken him many places since, and I'm excited to hear his perspectives on curiosity as well. Have I missed anything? Great. Well, I'm looking forward to not talking very much. I warned the speakers here, I wanted to give them an opportunity to, for them first, before you start offering things that you're curious about and they wander off in conversation, an opportunity to tell us a little bit about how they think about curiosity. So I actually didn't meet I met Aaron at a kid's birthday party, and I didn't realize that until he showed up tonight. But I haven't met any of the other people here, and so I'm going to be learning about how they think about curiosity as well. So the question really, and we'll start with Dr. Stricker. The question is, what does curiosity mean to you, or mean to the field that you come from, and how has it played a role in your professional career? Has curiosity played an essential role, or how have you thought about it as a neuroscientist and a dean?
Okay, so those are three questions. Curiosity, it's not that I've thought a lot about this, even in preparation for tonight. When I think about curiosity, I think of people who want to know something more than they already know, and they want to know it a lot. And so they're willing to do a lot of things in order to find out what they want to know. It could be anything, or it could be many things. And in the classroom, you see it among students who are especially inquisitive, who aren't satisfied with the information that's provided in the course. They want to do more reading or more digging. Among the faculty, I would be surprised if it wasn't a characteristic of all the faculty, who are scholars, who are interested in knowing things that nobody knows, nobody has known. I've spent 40-some years. I closed my lab 7 years ago. But for 42 years, what I was doing was trying to understand better how the brain works to control calorie and water homeostasis, fluid balance and caloric homeostasis. And I don't know somebody else who spent that much time, but I was something I wanted to know. And so it's like everything else. How much do you want to know? What are you willing to give up in order to get what you want? And so I gave up essentially my adult life because I was curious about it. And I would say that's probably characteristic of all the faculty on campus, that they get into something they really want to know. So how much do you want to know? And you do whatever it takes in order to find out. What was the middle question? Do you remember?
The question is, how has it influenced your professional career? And I think you've answered that.
And what was the one before that?
How would you define curiosity in your field?
Yeah, that was the first one. There's a second one that I'm asking about. Doesn't matter. So that is what I would say.
Okay. Fascinating. Alison, what do you think? How is curiosity defined in your field?
Right. So I guess I would say that I would have defined curiosity in my own career as a form of play. When I was little, and this will impinge on the digital humanist part later, my dad had a lot of diodes and Heathkit make-your-own-computer stuff in our house, and he made computers professionally for a living, and we would play with the breadboards, among other things, and make computers. This is when you could make them, and they were marginally, almost only slightly less powerful than the ones you could buy. And so, for me, and you can ask my family, this is true, this includes, hey, I'm curious, what does electricity feel like? It hurts. But I found that out to a certain extent, being curious. So I would say that in the field of computing, as is and as was, but as a youth, I had actually more contact with computing than I did with the humanities. So I eventually ended up going to school in the history of art and architecture, as we call it here at Pitt. And my same idea of curiosity prevails. Why do people create these spaces that we do around us? I focused on architecture myself, but why do we make images the way we do? Is it just communication? Surely not. How does that work? And so I consider it in that space and in the space of thinking about computing to be a form of play, where you just sort of jump in and you see and you mix things around and you aren't really worried that it's going to work out until your teacher tells you to be worried that and there's always a teacher, but until sort of the play shakes down. So now I kind of do a little bit of both. We'll get into that, and I like to believe that I bring that sense of curiosity as play to both.
Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about the ways that curiosity intersects with art, and I keep on, every time I turn, I keep bumping into curiosity, because it seems like it's everywhere. So the curiosity is the fuel for making art, right? It's the listening, the looking, the kind of the hunger, the drive to understand the world. There's then curiosity in kind of attention and like kind of focusing that kind of just general thought. Curiosity in terms of developing the ideas that you're going to explore, right? You're constantly kind of asking questions about, what is in the world, and then maybe even more importantly, what is not inside the world. And so then finding those empty spaces that you can kind of hollow out and explore and maybe fill with something interesting. And then as you make stuff, you constantly have to be curious about the stuff that you're making, right? Like I feel like when you stop being curious about the stuff that you make, that's when it gets real flat. It starts, it starts becoming uninteresting. And then even then the role of what we make outside, right? So even once it's all made and everything, once we start presenting it, I think that art's role is, one of my favorite teachers always described art as something that takes you someplace you've never been before. And I always really liked that, or this idea that art is something that wakes us up. And so it's, in some ways, I think it attempts to kind of create curiosity, right? Instill it in other people as well. And so it was really overwhelming, kind of, as I started kind of thinking this through and imagining the different corridors of the art practice. I just kept on bumping into this curious thing. In terms of my own work, I think that idea of play and the stuff that Alison said really rings true.
Well, how have you, so it sounds essential that you maintain curiosity about what you're doing, and so are there tricks to that for you? Is it about constant movement and exploration that you find that if you don't stay still and repeat things too much, that you find new?
I find that staying still actually helps, right? Slowing down, not completely still, because that's the challenge, right? You've got to slow down enough so that you can see the world and see these openings and see the potential, but you can't slow down so much that you stop, right? Like that's the challenge, and that was one of the things that I realized, I think, was that this curiosity is something that you're kind of honing throughout your life, right? It could just disappear, maybe, for some people. But as an artist, your job is to sort of keep hungry and keep finding those things that are interesting for you. And so, I think that's a really giant challenge, is to keep that kind of openness to the world. I think that slowing down helps because we often are all just going so fast that I think is one of our biggest challenges with curiosity, is just the speed at which things go, and the amount of I keep on being amazed at like how often I am entertained by something. Like I'm constantly seeing or reading or a video's playing or an ad is going off. Like I think that part of curiosity is that kind of openness to what that experience is, and so being in a space itself. So I will tell you it's very hard, and that it's a constant challenge, and that I fail all the time, and that failure, when I realized that I just I just rode my bike from home to school and I didn't see anything, is, you know, it like snaps me. I have to kind of like snap myself back into a slower time, or slap myself into a way of kind of being open to that. So yeah, play and.
I like how you associated curiosity with like a form of mindfulness and an openness. I think that's really nice.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, oftentimes we think of curiosity as being a knowledge gap, you know? So to desire to know something you don't already know means that you need the space to see that missing piece of information. And if you're constantly satiated by this influx of information that our world brings to us faster and faster, it could lead to you just feeling crammed, overstuffed by information and not.
Or satiated, right?
Yeah.
Or just like, oh yeah, this is great. Like all these things in my brain, you know, and I think that you gotta have a little space.
Well, Paolo, what do you think? Have we captured it all? I'm sure you have other things to add.
No, I think it's inexhaustible. I think it's archetypal. In my case, it came through the ambition to build a telescope when I was a child, and I keep thinking about that experience. But aside from the thrill of putting together the things and the lenses and the tube, it was not the issue of knowledge, which may sound like paradoxical. But here is the thing: is that the thrill was the idea of placing my eyes and close to the eyepiece and the images that would come through the telescope. I don't know whether that counts as knowledge, but I think that the thrill was the experience, because that was an extension of the senses and the body, like almost a prosthetic eye or something like that. But it was really the moment of the experience, especially because with home-built telescope, which lenses are, what you see is all blurred, and it's a challenge to get the thing because the field is so small and you have to take all these strange postures, placing this unstable, and then there is the wind, and then it never happens.
Yeah, and then it's a cloudy night when it all comes
And then
together.
it's a cloudy night, and but the thrill of the experience of something coming through the field. Because I remember the first time I could discern this blurred image of the moon with all these spots of light. It was fascinating. But the image was fascinating, that's all. I mean, it was just like a door was flung open into a new universe.
So do you think that this is what science does, that science helps us?
What good science should do, which is not what science does. Or at least what not average science does, in my modest opinion.
But at its best, it reaches beyond what we could see. Science, so a telescope is a technology that allows us to see things that we wouldn't otherwise.
Well, yes, it's some sort, as I said, of archetypal thing that pushes you to look for these experiences, and then you need to pluck up the courage to do it, and that's another issue, because sometimes you have to take risks in doing it.
Then curiosity is sure to take us into risky places.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yes. And the other thing about curiosity, which has not been mentioned but should be kept in mind, is that curiosity has become a sort of indiscriminately valuable. But the reality is that there are dark sides of curiosity. And in fact, I don't know exactly the history, but I would bet that for a long period of time, and for sure until the scientific revolution, 16th, 17th century, curiosity was almost a sin and dangerous and negative. Because we talked about the telescope, it behooves us to remember Galileo, who first turned something like a telescope to the moon. And in Galileo's time, the equivalent of what would be today the Oxford English Dictionary, if you look up the word curiosity, there is nothing but scorn and negativity. You shouldn't be curious.
It will only get you into trouble.
It will get you into trouble, definitely, because it's linked with heresy. And because curiosity leads to heresy. Curiosity is heretical.
Why don't we get some audience participation here so that we get that started early?
I think that's a really interesting point that you make about curiosity being heretical. And it comes back to, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, Mr. Video Performance Guy.
Aaron.
Aaron, okay, thanks. What you said about being still reminded me of what happens when you're interviewing, say, you're reviewing job candidates' applications. If you're in a hurry and you go through them quickly, there's very good evidence that your often unknown prejudices about people govern how you rank the people. If you slow down, you are much more open to candidates that don't fit your preconceived notions. I think you can be curious in those situations when you slow down and look for information that's outside of your sort of dogmatic system, right? And I think that ties in with what you were saying about curiosity being heretical, right? That being curious about what's outside the normal framework is really part of what happens with curiosity. The other thing I wanted to mention, then I'll let go of the microphone, is that in a number of parts of what people said, anticipation was such an important part of curiosity. Anticipation of what? I don't know. And I guess that's part of curiosity, right? We don't know quite what we're anticipating, but something that we haven't experienced, right?
Well, I was talking with a student in my lab today who said that sometimes she hates curiosity because she wants to know something so badly that it hurts. And so I do think this anticipation can sometimes be painful or be upsetting.
It can hurt. That's the problem with this thing. I speak too loud because that's the tendency with this. I tend to project with the students and the large classes. One of the things that definitely do not work for curiosity. The large classes, I mean, not to project with the curiosity, in case you didn't get it. But I've been in the business of replicating landmark experiments in the history of science, and they did it with Galileo. And there was one which nobody had been able to replicate. And when I got the little thing which I wanted, I was so excited that I ran down the stairs, almost killed myself, trying to get to the basement to fill the thing with water. I slept down.
I mean, that was something that was interesting to me too. This idea of I had so many of my intersections with curiosity were so positive, and it seemed so integral to the making process and being an artist that I found myself kind of looking for those opportunities or those places where it would be negative, or I was trying to it can't just be good, right? And so how does this work that it when it's not useful, and it's so important that I think it's still worth the risk of being curious. So I don't think I think it's still worth the risk of doing it. But you know, like, it can be really overwhelming, right? Like you can begin asking too many questions. You can get stuck in this loop, and I think that's one of the things that as somebody who is trying to maintain this kind of curiosity, finding ways to kind of hone or focus that curiosity and realize when you're kind of, you know, just digging yourself into a hole or something like that, or just, you know, pulling up too many questions to answer. I think those are things that, you know, it's like a matter of volume or something like that. Like understanding like how much you can actually take in before you overwhelm yourself or something. So
Curiosity is like a drug. It can be addictive. You don't want that because it's driving your behavior, but it can become addictive. One experience which I have to resist is that because I work with books and rare books, and up until 10 years ago, to find rare books, you needed to go to libraries, so that to a good library, good research library. But nowadays, you can download or see books, digitized books all over the place, and I can't resist it. And because I trace the lineage of ideas, and then it's inexhaustible, it's addictive, it's destructive, it ruins your mind.
Well, actually, on that vein, Kate and I have actually talked about this in terms of the brute information sciences of the iSchool fame, because we're in a lovely library where every single one of the books on the shelves that I can see have a number on them that not only tells you where they go in order, but a little bit about what they're about, right? That's what the Library of Congress numbers do for you, or Dewey. These happen to be LC. And when we were trained, I'm going to go ahead and use a we there, you could go to the section of the library, and one of the things this classification system allows you to be is a little bit curious in the form of browsing. And you look to the left and you look to the right, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then why did the librarians put this next to that? I don't know. And it was sort of a little bit of an interesting play. One of the things that I notice in my students now, though, is related to not only digitized texts of a special collections of a specialized nature, but the fact that most of these books, the books that come out now, are themselves born digital, or at least published digitally. It is an utterly overwhelming experience for them, in a way that you could go, if you were in a school like this and in a library like this, you could be assured 20 or so years ago that this was all you probably needed to know in art history. Like, and if it isn't here, that's great, but here's good. That isn't the world we live in anymore, and it can be, frankly, frightening to think that if you, especially in grad school, if you need to master a field, you need to master everything ever written in a field, not everything in this building, everything. And I think that that's an interesting balance for humanities scholars, at least now, as they train their students to learn to, it's not to balance curiosity, but it's to learn the bounds within which you are free, sincerely free to ask questions and to be curious about this space, because it is maybe the conclusion I'm reaching in my own head is it gets harder and harder to be curious in an infinite space.
Well, in these neighborhoods, I mean, they really are
Right.
neighborhoods in here that are defined by a smaller library where you can look to the left or the right on a book of interest. You know, search tools oftentimes are designed to get you right to the exact result that you're looking for and don't allow you to look out into the neighborhood of ideas. And do you feel like, I mean, I have fond memories of being in libraries as a kid and wandering my eyes down the road to find something new. And are there ways in which we can do that now? Our students can do that? Or
No.
are our tools
I'm feeling lucky.
yeah, right?
You never know what will happen.
Well,
Actually, Google's working on a search engine that does attempt to categorize the world and allow us to search it in ways that are also synthetic in the connections that it's drawing. And so that's one of the projects. I was part of a conference last summer that, and there's somebody presenting on it. It was fascinating. It's a little bit of a, it'll be different than that, right? The experience will be different, but I think that they recognize that, just because you're looking for parrot and all of the different parrot word things come up in connection to that's not necessarily the breadth of knowledge that you're interested in. I think people are trying to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. I think to a certain extent, one of the things that's useful to keep in mind in terms of computing is that what we may have thought about the browsing experience in the stacks was its physicality, and or what we thought was the sort of, at least a lot of the ways that the early librarians thought of it, that they were just describing the universe as it was, like that they were giving us the order of things and they were arranging them on the shelves, which is sort of a beautiful and frightening thought all at once. That what the work of right now, the 21st century, and in fact in the digital humanities and the information sciences, is to actually try to tease out what the actual affordances of this browse actually were, because you can conflate, like as LC actually does, it conflates location with subject. Those aren't actually the same thing. And in the digital space, they absolutely aren't the same thing, because location is completely transformed in a digital space. So the question for, do we want to replicate that experience, or are we just trying to replicate the containment?
There's something comfortable about that.
Yeah.
Right? There's something really comfortable about knowing that this is everything that you need to know.
Yeah, there is. So, I mean, and it sort of seems in its own way sort of limiting and strange now to think, oh, you didn't read everything? Well, of course, nobody reads everything, but there's these pretensions to such things. So I think a lot of the challenge for developing, you can do it computationally like Google does, or you could do it more in a more bespoke manner, where you'll have someone construct for you an interface that responds directly to the sort of thing that you need. And I frankly think there's a lot of 21st century research to be done in that area.
So this is one challenge that I would put to the people who develop these digital technologies for not only the humanities, but I remember one thing that struck me with Marshall McLuhan. Few of you young people probably know about him, but I know about him mostly because he was a medievalist and an expert in manuscripts. But he said that when a powerful technology or technology powerful enough develops, then there is a change in the way we distribute our, you put it something like a ratio of the senses. So when you get the printing press, things become more visual instead of, and less oral. One thing which we'll see, which I would be curious to see how it goes there, with all this technology, Google stuff and so on, how that is going to change our sensory apparatus or the way in which we deploy our senses. And so far I don't know, because I think that so far we have replicated the environment, right? Is that right? We digitize books. I mean, come on, that's not terribly creative. It's just new technology applied to the whole thing. So we'll see. But I'm curious to see there. And I don't know, maybe if that is positive or negative.
It will be driven by curiosity.